So thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome to Supporting Community Success Through Positive Supports. And presenting for you today will be Dr. Beth Boone, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities at USF, and they have been there for over 25 years. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and Dr. Boone is going to take over.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you to FCIC for asking me to come and talk about something that is very important to me, near and dear to my heart. I still get nervous. It's so funny. After 20 years, I still get nervous, but I think it's because it's important. So I am going to start my slideshow. Can you hear me and can you see my slides? Can we get a thumbs up? Okay, super. There, okay. So I'm here to talk about supporting community success through positive supports. I'm a clinical psychologist for 20 years now. And while I'm an administrator at this point in my career, for many, many years, I have worked with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities across the lifespan to provide positive supports and to help the people in our environments understand that it's that our work is more than about identifying a problem and fixing a person. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about behavior in a larger context. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite quotes by Abraham Maslow. And he said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you will see every problem as a nail. And in my work in the community with families and educators, medical providers and service providers of all sorts, our job really is to increase capacity and give people different tools to work with. So that's this the viewpoint that I'll talk about today. You can consider another tool. Okay, so our objectives, we're going to talk about seeing people's behavior as communication rather than just a problem, and talk about how our environment shapes the way all of us behave and engage, and talk about the ways that we can work with our environments in order to provide support for engagement and to decrease the possibility of challenging behavior being used as communication. Okay, so Rob Horner said problem behavior continues to be the primary reason why individuals in our society are excluded from school, home, recreation, community, and work. So that makes it really important that we have this conversation, because maybe you can think about a time in your life, whether you're an individual with intellectual developmental disabilities, or maybe you're a parent or a teacher, an educator, or perhaps you own a business, and stop and think about a time, for example, that someone was told, yes, we're excited that you want to work, but you have to stop running away from the group home, or running away from home, or doing this particular behavior before we can put you in the class that you want to be in, or the job that you want to be in, or until you can live on your own. And so because this is a significant, something that happens a significant amount of time, that's why it becomes just important to discuss it. So we have learned some things over time. There was a time when the professionals in this field really looked at behavior in a vacuum. Someone would be the identified patient, which is not a term we even use at this point, but the identified patient with the problem behavior, and they were referred to service providers in order to fix that behavior. And we didn't necessarily really look at the context. So we didn't pay much attention to the environment where people lived and worked and played. And we didn't really, we kind of knew that those things were aspects of a person's, say, social history, but we didn't necessarily look at all of those aspects and taking into account what was going on with them behaviorally. And similarly, behavior plans sort of early on looked at how can we stop you from doing this behavior? So we can take things away. If you have a good day, whatever that means, you can have access to things that you like. And there weren't a whole lot of other aspects of those plans that really helped us to support engagement and adaptive behavior. And we required people with disabilities to earn the right to go to a regular classroom, to have a real job, right? Or to live in their own home. So it was really this idea that you have to fix yourself first, you have to improve first before you can have the opportunity to do these things. Now, we have gotten, I think, to our credit, maybe people have taught us over time, and we've been open to listen and have come across time to really understand that the environment has a lot to do with for all of us, not just people with disabilities, but with how we behave, how we socialize, and how our communication is developed. It's really important that we understand what people are doing and where and with whom they spend their time. And as I said with the Rob Horner quote before, this is an important discussion because it is behavior that often causes people to not be able to access the life, the lifestyle, the activities, the social relationships that they might want to have. So that goes to the idea, and this, I don't know who all's here, and so I don't want to make assumptions about what you know or what you don't know, but let's say for the sake of argument that this is a new idea, that we don't just target a behavior to stamp it out. Let's just get rid of this problematic behavior. But that we look at behavior, all behavior really, whether it be problematic for us or whether we consider it more adaptive, that what people do is trying to tell us something. It's trying to communicate something to us, and that we as care providers, as parents, as educators, we have to learn how to listen. If you've got some spare time in these busy lives that we all have right now, Herb Lovett wrote a book called Learning to Listen, and it really is an eye-opener in terms of kind of shifting the way that we think about behavior and to looking at it about people in environments with people. So challenging, so behaviors of all sorts, it's certainly challenging behaviors or strategies that people may use to get their needs met. They're telling us, this is a need of mine. This is a value or it's something that's important to me. And part of what we have to do in the environment is to figure out what kinds of communication of these wants and needs will actually work best for the person. So really it's a shift from traditional behavior modification to look at the why of behavior. Why are behaviors occurring or not occurring? How can we support people rather than spend a lot of time trying to change them, right? Really looking at the full environment and the context around people rather than just have the person be the focus. How we can prevent some of the behavioral challenges or challenges in general for people rather than just spend our time and our resources reacting to things as they come up. And it's really important that we're focusing on building a repertoire, a group of behaviors that help a person express their needs and wants and get those needs and wants met, rather than just pick the most problematic behavior and try to eliminate that, right? And so therefore, we're not just looking at behavior, we actually are looking at life. So then the goal of positive behavior supports is to support, I mean, the word's in there. So it suggests that we want to support people. And I put with disabilities in parentheses because many of us that are on this call either have a loved one with an intellectual and developmental or other disability, or we work with folks with disabilities in our job. But positive behavior supports actually is a technology, is a way of thinking that applies to more than just people with disabilities. It actually applies to all of us in a way. But we want to put these supports in order to essentially help people enjoy life, help them to be as independent as possible, and to live a typical life. Now, there's my quotes, right? Because what is a typical life? And isn't that a funny question to ask, especially while we're still in the midst of a world pandemic and all of us are, I don't know, longing for normalcy, whatever that is, and wondering what does a normal life look like anymore? But what I mean by living a typical life is that we want people with disabilities to be able to live, work, and play in environments, in the same environments that people without disabilities do, as per their preference and with the supports that they need in order to do that. And should there be challenging behavior, and I put problem in quotes, problem behavior is kind of the term that was used, you know, sort of initially, and has sort of shifted to challenging behavior. I heard someone speak a couple of years ago and talk about this group of behaviors, whatever they look like, whether it be aggression or self-injury or property destruction or running away, as distress behaviors. The people are letting us know that something is not working for them in the way that their life is going at this moment. So if there are challenging behaviors that are getting in the way of those first three goals, then a fourth goal of positive behavior supports is to help all of us overcome the excuse me, those challenging behaviors so that the person can access a life that they would like to have. I can see the chat. I will glance at it from time to time. If you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'm talking really fast, so my guess is we'll also have time at the end for discussion. Okay, so it really comes down to us to sort of decipher what's the message, to put on our detective hat and to look at clues and try to figure out what people are telling us. Some of the folks that we work with that have autism, and in the case of CARD, don't use words to communicate, and so we want to make sure that people are understanding that even though someone is nonverbal in the sense that they don't use words to communicate, that everyone communicates. And it's really up to us to try to figure out what the message, the messages are that people are giving us. And so some of the, from a research standpoint, from clinical work done across the years, some of the most common communications or messages of challenging behavior is, I don't want to do this, right? This is too much. This task is too hard, or this situation, the interaction is too prolonged. The social demands are too much. I don't want to be in this place. I don't want to be with this person. And granted, I think we can all think about sometimes when we when we might have used behavioral messages to let people know that we were not happy where we are, or content, or the situation where we were was not working for us. A second is for attention. I want attention, and oftentimes people will say to us, "Well, you know, he or she just does that for attention. He just wants attention." Yes, and so do I. And so do you, and so does everybody. Everyone wants attention in some shape or form from specific people or from any people. And sometimes if people are demonstrating some behavioral challenges, it becomes that becomes what we really get focused on. And so when people are just hanging out, being chill, not demonstrating those really loud behaviors for us, sometimes the tendency is to want to not rock the boat, I guess. And actually I say I guess, but I've actually heard that when he's quiet, when he's calm, or if she appears happy and calm, we don't want to rock the boat. So what ends up happening is that those really those loud behaviors get attention and the quiet behaviors don't. And that's definitely not a place that we want to get stuck. And it's not where the person wants to be either. So I say rock the boat. If somebody is doing well, and that's an opportunity to give a really nice experience of attention from a person that's important to the individual. I want this, right? This is, I want this thing. I want this food. I'm ready to eat. I want this item that's important to me, or I want or don't want this sensory input. I think that one of the things that maybe we've gotten better at over time in our field is understanding the impact of sensory differences for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Either the need for sensory input, so it feels, looks, sounds, or tastes good to me, or it calms me down, right? Or the impact of the sensory surround in overwhelming the nervous system and creating behaviors that look excessive because people are letting us know, I need that to stop. That light is, that I can see that light flickering and buzzing even if nobody else can, and it makes it impossible for me to do anything but see and hear that. Or it's a habit. Sometimes people get into sensory activities that are habitual, and sometimes it's because there's not a lot else to keep them really occupied. So some of our detective work, I guess, in the field is to spend time with that person and spend time with caregivers and in various environments and try to figure out what is enriching about these environments. Often what happens when you have people that have behavioral challenges is their environment becomes less rich and not more. That things get taken away from people because they're disrupting things. Maybe they're hurting people, or maybe they're hurting themselves, or they're breaking things, or they're disrupting the workplace, so that people can't get their work done. And usually what that means is that we, those of us with power, power is an illusion, but those of us who are in a decision-making capacity remove things. And so an environment gets actually less rich, more impoverished. And so then the needs actually increase. So we've sort of made it harder for the person and ourselves for providing that support. So we can think then about challenging behavior as expressing an unmet need. And in that way, the need is really the issue of importance, not the behavior. So we can think of challenging behavior as a symptom, not the problem. So normally if I'm doing this in a live room and I say, let's see, there's 25 people here. If there's 25 people in a room, there's usually at least 3-4 of them, maybe a little bit more, depending on what time of year it is, that have the sniffles, right? Have a stuffy nose. And so actually right now it's a weird example because if someone starts to sneeze and cough, we all think they have COVID. So when we go running into the hills, but at any rate, COVID aside, let's say that I wanted to help the people that come to a training with me get over, right, their stuffy nose so that they can be comfortable during our training. So if you come into a training with me and you have a stuffy nose, I'm going to give you a Benadryl on the way in the door. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do for all of you with stuffy noses. And I know you're out there. Is so you've got a Benadryl. Okay. So if I do that, what's the problem? Is that a good solution? Because I'm a problem solver. So is that a good solution? You could, if you have an opinion about that solution, go ahead and type it in the chat real quick. I'll wait. I can't see any messages. So, oh, okay. So Denise says, nope, I might be allergic to Benadryl. Okay. Yeah, that's one problem. What else? It's a broad solution, Christine Rover. So Christine's a plant. No, I asked her to say that. No, actually, so yes, actually, Elizabeth, you're absolutely right. The last thing I want to do when people are coming in to do a workshop with me is to put them asleep, right? But what Christine said is where I'm heading with this, which is, so what is Benadryl? Benadryl is an antihistamine. So what are antihistamines created to treat? What do antihistamines do? They treat allergies, right? Okay, so here's the problem. So for those people, other than the drowsy piece and might be allergic to it piece and might have a weird reaction to it piece, if you have an allergy and you take a Benadryl, it might help your stuffy nose. Are allergies the only reason why people have stuffy noses? Is that the only reason? What else could cause a stuffy nose or a runny nose? Yeah, other medical conditions like cold, sure, COVID. Yep, sensory issues. Yeah, we live in Florida, so you might have been in the hot outside and come into the cold inside, or vice versa. All right. So my point is that in this case, the stuffy nose is the symptom, but not the problem. So if we're treating the symptom, then we might possibly have landed on the right strategy, or we might not be helping at all and might actually make it worse. So in order to understand the underlying unmet need, the underlying need, we really have to understand the context, the things that lead to behavior happening, and we need to address each one of those things. Okay. So no Benadryl for any of you, at least for me. So in other words, the focus of positive behavior supports is not on the what of behavior, although we have to talk about the forms that various behaviors take, but the why. Why is this happening? Okay, so back to Rob Horner, who says, behavior support is the redesign of environments, not the redesign of individuals. So a behavior support plan describes what we will do differently. And I like that last part so much that I actually had it put on a coffee cup and it sits in my office. But it's the idea that it's not about fixing the person. It's about really fixing the environment. So what will we do to help the person? The prerequisite approach doesn't really work. What we need to do is make sure that needs are met. So the first thing we can do in terms of prevention is to identify problematic parts of our environment, right? Identifying our triggers and sort of smoothing those triggers as much as possible. So if we have a person who who is screaming and covering his ears because and closing his eyes really tight because the light is buzzing and flickering. It doesn't matter if we see that or experience that or not. If that's a trigger for that challenging behavior, we can't get that person to engage in an activity, in social interaction while that is going off, and while they are going off. So we really look at our environment and say, is this a fit? Is this a fit for the person? And I think that's really important when we start talking about our adult service systems, because Historically, the jobs that we've helped people with autism or developmental disabilities get have been pretty specific. I mean, we fold boxes in the in the warehouse. We do mopping. We stock grocery store shelves. And if that's what people want to do with their lives, that's fine. But what we need to be doing is figuring out reducing people's need to communicate by improving their situation. And that involves knowing what they want, not what we think we want with all of our years of experience and expertise and whatnot. So we really want to look at the environment and create an environment that is engaging, that supports engagement. And the first is that we need to teach all individuals to communicate. I had worked mostly with kids for many years. I started out as a pediatric psychologist working in hospitals, and then moved into the kind of early intervention and early school age. And then I began working in the adult service system. In 2008, I started doing training with waiver support providers. And boy, was that an eye opener for me. I was basically gobsmacked by the number of people that we were working with in the adult service system that had literally no clear way of communicating. So, they could be 40 years old and have never developed a communication system in their environment. And people were wondering or confused by why the person was hitting people in order to get what they needed, or running away to tell us that things weren't working for them. And am I saying that everybody that's not verbal needs to have this elaborate communication device? Well, no, and those are great if you can get them, if you can get them paid for, if you can get them programmed, if you can get them fixed when they break. Otherwise, they just sit in the closet. But no, any way of communicating, cards, pictures, pecs, signs, whatever it is, we have to give people a means of telling us what they want and need. Because granted, everyone will tell us what they want or need in some way. We want to make sure that they've got a way to do it that will be responsive to, will get those needs met. Promoting positive peer interactions and supports. Lots of folks that we work with don't naturally have some of those smooth social communication, social skills, turn taking, so on and so forth. As naturalistically or as formally as possible, spending time to make sure that people have an opportunity to interact with others in a positive way. Consistency in schedule as well as flexibility when needed. There's something that brings anxiety down when you know what's going to happen next. And I worked with a young man who had kind of persistent question asking that was really born, I think, out of a very strong anxiety. And he would ask, when we actually started trying to measure it, he was spending about 90% of his time with other people asking questions. So is this Wednesday? Is this the day we're going to go to the park? Are you going to go to the park with me? Are we going to go in your car? Is your car the red car? Where's your car parked? And it would go on like that. And you could answer the questions, but we still weren't really, there was an uncertainty about when things were happening and an inability to really kind of hold in his head that Thursdays were the day that, we went to the community center to play basketball. You really just needed us to help make the schedule clearer, right? And consistent, so that there wasn't this driving need to ask questions all the time, so that people were giving him that constant reassurance. Making prevention a priority is really a great idea, because if we can prevent challenging behavior from happening, we don't have to react to it. And we don't get into this coercive cycle with people of trying to get them to stop doing whatever it is once it starts. And that really, for me as a professional, whenever I would go into a setting, I know that I didn't know. I didn't know the person. I didn't know the setting. I didn't know the staff. I didn't know the resources. It's really important to those of us who aren't primary caretakers, care providers, to ask and then to listen. Let's see. Elizabeth says, I have a little guy that currently displays something similar. He would ask the same question over and over again. Yeah, it's yeah, I could do this conversation about this question asking probably all day long, but I will say that at least in my experience, oftentimes I have to qualify it because there are other reasons, but oftentimes it's based in the anxiety of sort of not knowing the structure of the day. When am I going to get to play again? When am I going to get snack again? And sometimes that gets resolved to a certain extent when the routine is clear. Like, so we always go out to play after, for little guys, like we always go out to play after we have lunch or something like that. But if that's not working, a lot of times people, the frontal lobe is not holding those schedules in memory. So, we can't just keep telling, we can't keep answering and saying, yes, we're going to play basketball on Thursday. Sometimes we have to put it visually, right? The visual schedule is there. The person has the power of, pulling over a card that says playtime and sticking it down because we know that's what's happening next. It just as an aside, what we did with this house staff is his questions are almost always the same from day to day. So we actually started answering his questions before he asked them as a preventive strategy. Now understand, he had lots of words and we were able to do this, but so he would come in and they'd say, hey, it's a great day, Brian. Today's Tuesday. Today we're going to go play, or today's Thursday. Today is the day we go play basketball. We're going to go right after lunch. We're going to go in the van, which is parked next to my red car under the tree. And so, all the questions that he was repeatedly asking days and days in a row, we provided him with the answers prior to his asking, as well as a calendar and a visual schedule and some other ways to kind of anchor that for him. And he went from about 90% of his time asking questions to about 40, if I recall the data collection, which is still a lot of question asking, but you can imagine he got a lot of his time back to enjoy his interactions with other people. Okay, I'll move on. But if you want to circle back around and grab me by email later, I love to talk about this stuff. Okay, so people need to know what's expected of them, right? Every environment has behavioral expectations. We call them rules, but frankly, it's not just little kids who have rules. Workplaces have rules, both formal and social, school environments, college environments. We can expect people to guess, or we can, and it will not go well for us to guess what the behavioral expectations are, and have people be responsible for helping to make the rules. If people are part of a community that comes up with their rules, then you've got the buy-in, right? Then you're just reminding people this is what we said we would do. And we want to make sure that choice making is a really important aspect, and that access to success is frequent. We need to make sure that people don't just get good stuff when they do exactly what they're supposed to and all the right steps. We need to make sure that that the environment provides lots of things that are reinforcing, and that effort is an opportunity to be successful. So I'll just sort of skip over these a little bit for the sake of time, but this is where we remove triggers, right? We take away, we take for a period of time, if somebody's really having a lot of dysregulation, having a really hard time engaging in their environment, let's remove some of the demands. Not forever, right? But if we remove some of the demands for a period of time, then person is not constantly challenged. They're not constantly given having to make the choice in whether they're going to do this thing that is super hard for them, or whether they're going to let us know behaviorally that this is not working out for them. Okay. Again, choice making is super important. We also need to anticipate when a person's going to have problems. So let's say a person has allergies, right? Who feels awful when their allergies are flaring up, right? Your temper is short, you're not getting good sleep, you can't breathe. And at that point, you might flip out if somebody asks you to do something that seems hard for you. So we're all like that. So if we know of situations that are going to provide challenges for people, let's pull back during that time, right? Let's see if there's things that can be relaxed when the person is already struggling, so that they don't struggle harder and sort of bring us into the struggle with them. Ultimately, prevention is a very good strategy. Often when we use these enriched environments, people's use of challenging behaviors to communicate to us typically go down quite substantially. That puts the responsibility on us to make the environment not challenging, right? But that's not the way of the world. And we want people to be as independent as possible. So while we do these preventive strategies and some of those behavioral communications go down for people, then we want to come back in and we want to make sure that people have the tools that they need. They're learning the tools that they need to communicate what they want and need. And you can't learn, you can't teach while we're all in crisis together. So that's where the prevention really helps give us that time together to teach. And so replacement behaviors just mean we're going to teach somebody how to get their needs met without them having to run away or grab people or break stuff or we'll scream with their hands over their ears in order to get those needs met. So these are some of the things that we want to teach people to say, and we need to make sure that we understand that we're not teaching them to say it with words necessarily. I remember that everybody doesn't necessarily use words to communicate. So we can use signs, we can use, signs like ASL, but we can also use signs. So a break card is an amazing thing, right? That if you hold up a break card and you get a break, it's great. You don't have to push the table over. You don't have to run away. You don't have to sock the person next to you in order to stop the task from happening. It sounds simple. People are, I've had trouble convincing folks sometimes to implement a break card or something like that. But basically, you want your time back, right? You don't want to spend a lot of time reacting to challenging behaviors, and it disrupts what everyone's doing. So we need to provide people with the opportunity to learn how to ask for what they want or need in a way that the environment will be more supportive of. And then we need to make sure that we are supportive of it, right? Because if it's harder to get a break with your break card, or if it's harder to, to have a work task, take a break from a work task by asking than it is by by knocking your chair over and running out of the room, then, we're going to use the behaviors that work for us. Okay. Okay. So those of us that do skills teaching, I don't know, who's in the group, but I assume we have some teachers here. Hopefully we have some employers here, and we'll have some parents here. As we are teaching people new skills, it's really important that we ask ourselves some questions about whether those skills are functional or not. I'll use the example of shoe tying, and it doesn't make me really popular at IEP meetings and stuff. But if you have somebody that's had a teaching goal of tying their shoes for an extended period of time, and shoes are still not being tied, then maybe it's not going to happen. And maybe we need to make sure that shoes can be put on and affixed in some way. Velcro, boots. I mean, sandals. We're Florida. We wear flip-flops all year round. So the issue is we need to make sure that the things that we're asking people to learn are actually getting them somewhere in their life. And so here's some questions that we can ask. Will they need someone to do it for them if they can't do it for themselves? That's functional, right? We want people to be able to be independent, because not only is that less time consuming for everyone in the environment, but it's also dignity promoting. People want to do things for themselves. Will they need the skill often? Right? Are we sorting beads into colored, by color into bowls, or are we sorting laundry to put it in the washing machine? What are we actually going to do with the skill of sorting into colors? Will learning this skill allow them to take part in age appropriate activities or preferred leisure tasks? And again, this goes around to, how do we know what people's preferred leisure tasks is? Well, as a behavior analyst, there's a whole technology for doing preference assessment and things like that. But if you know somebody, then you know what they dig, right? And if you're an educator, or if you're a service provider, and you're not asking the people that know the person the best, or asking them themselves, or spending time with them to see what they go to when there are opportunities, you're missing a chance to find something that both enriches the environment and is really motivating for the person. Will this task that I'm teaching them, will it help them get something they want or get out of something they don't want? Because simply put, folks, that's why we do what we do. All of us, not just people with disabilities, not just students, not just employees, but all of us. The great portion of our behaviors is either to get something that's important to us, or to get out of something that we really hate the idea of. And some of us are just more skillful than others at doing that without getting, without somebody busting them and saying, I know what you're doing. You're trying to get out of this. So, and here's the big one. Can they get paid for doing it? And it was not that long ago that very question, as it related to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, was very provocative. Why? Because we didn't think about people with IDD as gainful employees. And they were either not doing anything, or they were, doing sub-minimum wage sort of pre-employment activities, but we weren't really taking them into planning for how they could, it feels good to work. It feels good to get your own money. It feels good to give back to the community. And so, yeah, I added, this was a list I got from somewhere, and then I added, can they get paid for doing it? Because that's functional. Yeah. If somebody's going to pay you to do it, that's a good skill to learn. Just to wrap up, we have to even go bigger from there. We have to look beyond behavior, and we have to see, are we helping people get the life that they care about? I mean, do they have time with people that are important to them? here's a provocative thing, if you're working with people, to challenge you to do is identify what people admire about the person. Does a person have a specific interest that they're an expert at and that gives them a chance to be admired and a leader by others? Are people getting access to a variety of activities? And it's just as important for us to know what's important to the person that we're working with than what we think is important for the person or their parents think or anyone. We need to have these conversations where we are able to look at both. Yeah, choices. Is what the person's doing during the day contributing to their self-esteem? So it's really an opportunity to take a step back and be like, not about let's make this behavior stop, but to really say, does this person have a quality of life? Is this we want to do health and safety because obviously that's a big issue, but we have to take stock in what is working in people's lives and what needs to be changed, and be kind of bold about it. So I'm going to tell you a really quick story about an individual that I worked with. I worked with a team of waiver provider, Medicaid waiver providers who had group homes and day hab settings for young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And they had a young man who they said he eloped. Maybe the professionals in the group or have heard the word eloped. It doesn't mean he ran off and got married. It means he ran off, right? And he would leave. They would get him to the day hab program, and then just the minute he got a chance, he would take off, right? And then they'd have to go find him. And he could go far too, a wiry little guy, but he could, miles, he could go miles. And they'd get him and they'd bring him back, and he'd be back in the workshop, or they'd take him back to the house. And what he loved more than anything was he loved plants. He loved nature. He loved being out. He loved to have his feet in the dirt. He liked to dig. He liked to plant things. But he was going every day to this inside a warehouse day hab program, sorting things into boxes for shipment, and he was taken off, right? And it was so bad that he would bring these consequences home to the workshop or to his group home, and he'd even lost his gardening privileges at the group home because he kept running away from the workshop. So he had even less of what he loved. And so in working with the group of providers, I said, can't we just get him a job doing something with plants? And they were like, oh, no, we can't get him a job in the community because he's a flight risk. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to ask you guys to be really bold here and see if this change can be made. And they did because I was just doing training with them. So without my oversight, they found him a job with they lived in a small town in Arkansas, and they found him a job with the Public Works Committee, working with the people who maintained the flower boxes around the flagpoles and in the medians of the street. And he held the hose for them, right? So he would hold the hose and they to start out, and they would do their maintenance work. The thing is it's really hard to run away when you're holding the hose. But also he was outside. He was surrounded by plants. They let him do some digging. He helped to water the plants. And they came back to me about 6 months later when I did a survey about how things were going, and said that he had not run away from the workplace, not once, since they make that change. The only time that they had recorded him eloping is when it rained and he had to go to the day hab program with everyone else. Okay. So what's the point of my story? The point of my story is he didn't have to earn his way into the life that he wanted. They provided him with access with what he really loved. And he just lived, right? He just got into it. He enjoyed his day. And all those behavior problems, because running away is significant. All right. I understand that you can get out there and you could be hurt. So people freak out about it. And I understand that. But they took this huge step. And what happened? Well, he got a life, right? And they had a lot more time to spend just enjoying him. So I'll end with this quote by Billie Holiday, which is, "You've got to have something to eat and a little love in your life before you can hold still for anybody's sermon on how to behave." Well, I feel like I was talking really fast. I know we've just got a few minutes left. I would take questions, or if people want to follow up with me after the fact, I think my email is here somewhere. Thank you, Deborah.
If you have a question, you can raise your hand, or you can type it into the chat if you don't want to be seen on the camera. And if you're on the phone, you have to push *6 to unmute yourself and push *6 to mute yourself again.
And I also put my email in the chat, which is Boone4, Boone4 @usf.edu. If you should want to follow up about anything. I've given week-long seminars on this topic, so it's hard to hold me to an hour, but I do love it. I really appreciate FCIC and Denise, and thank you to our 24 participants. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Joseph.
Okay, just for attendance purposes, those of you who are in the room, I've been asking everyone to put your name that you registered with in your job title, or the agency that you're with, into the chat for attendance purposes. Please do that. I know about 12 of you have, but the rest of you have not. So please put your name and the agency you work with into the chat. And we have one person on the phone. Can you unmute and let us know who you are so I can mark you as being present?
I do have a question from Damien about recommendations, a beginning primer on behavior supports for beginners. I'm working at home today and my bookshelves at the office, but I actually do have some recommendations. And Denise, do I have access to people's email addresses from the presentation, or is there a way to send things out? Okay, I'll send out some resources. They think there's a number of ways that you can go about understanding things from a functional standpoint. I'll send you some that are less technical and a few that are a little bit more. So we'll make sure everybody has that. Thank you.
And I am going to put into the chat the link for the survey. As everyone knows, we're doing electronic surveys now. So once you complete the link, I'll get your certificate to you, and I will also verify your attendance as well.
And Denise, is the presentation, the PDF being sent out?
The presentation will be put on our website as a video very shortly. And so you'll have access to it, and it'll also be added to our on-demand webinars that people can view in the future.
Wonderful.
Thank you guys for putting information into the chat. Just want to let you know our next event is going to be Transition Basics, information for families and others who support students with disabilities. And that's going to be on October 19th from 4:30 to 6 p.m. And that'll be led by Lisa Chavez Friedman. And then on November 16th, we are going to be featuring Rachel Barcelona, who is going to talk about passions to profits. And that information should be coming to all of you as well. Any other questions? I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to particularly thank Dr. Boone for presenting on positive behavior supports that are applicable in the workplace, because that's something that's very important for us. I hope that you guys continue to join us and follow us for our webinars. And I just also want to let you guys know that the Talent Actualized Conference will be back in April of 2022. Have a great day. Take care,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
Please visit our website for more information about our programs, projects, and how you can get involved.